Good day, I'm junior researcher Adam Southgate, and today's lecture will be covering the Fey Sphere's false hills. I'd appreciate that all hunters please subscribe as to not miss any future lectures, and also if you enjoy the lecture and find it informative, please like the video and click the bell to ensure you do not miss any future announcements. I would also be very happy to hear your thoughts, views and stories of your interactions with the monsters of the spheres in the comment area of this video. I will also do my best to answer any questions you may have. So, to begin, as always, we'll start with our general announcements. Firstly, I will be endeavouring in future to release these videos on Fridays, as previously stated, as this appears to be a more appropriate time to do so. Secondly, hunters Glitchy 5420, Oswolf O'Sulphus and Orion Bernards 603 took on the contract to hunt down Gareth the Unborn in the town of Cwmfelin. From these submitted reports, the contract was not exactly orthodox, though it was successful. The plan the three came up with was to offer an apprentice hunter 10% of the total payment to act as bait for Gareth, who specifically uses body parts from men between the ages of 18 and 22. The search for a volunteer didn't take as long as you might think, as most apprentices are paid in experience and second-hand equipment. The team's plan involved allowing the apprentice to be grabbed and taken back to Gareth's hideaway so that any research notes could be recovered. This worked well, with Gareth spotting the apprentice and using an ether rag to incapacitate him. He then pulled the apprentice into his car and drove away. Discreetly hidden upon the apprentice's person was a phone with a tracking app enabled, allowing the three to follow at a safe distance. As it turns out, Gareth had set up at a disused pub, a short drive out of town. The three entered armed with 2 melee weapons and 1 firearm, specifically of the farmer's shotgun variety. They found Gareth already beginning to cut into the apprentice, showing the desperation he had after losing his progress in Abereron. They attempted to force Gareth to surrender, however he suddenly reached for what was later discovered to be a homemade flashbang grenade, and so he was shot in centre mass. While I can say we are thankful to the three for bringing Gareth to justice, in future I would ask that you not use apprentices as bait. While the apprentice in question was lucky enough to come out of the experience with only a few small superficial cuts and a bad headache, it could have been much worse. Finally, a collection of Gwylwyr have been spotted and confirmed by the gamekeepers observing the small village of Felinfach. These diminutive Fey constructs are typically the tools of more powerful Fey, acting as secondary eyes, and while not dangerous in themselves, if they are left to find whatever they are searching for, it could lead to disastrous results. Luckily, we have discovered that if they are destroyed while in use, the Fey controlling them will be debilitated for some time due to the pain of the sudden disconnection. The Fey will recover in time, but will most likely avoid such actions in future. We require a team of 5 hunters to take on the contract, and we suggest bringing shotguns with plenty of birdshot. To begin, I must first explain the odd case of the Fey Mimic, as the False Hills are a subspecies of Mimic. The Fey Mimic is a strange case for us, as they do not typically bear the telltale signs of the Fey Sphere. We believe, though have not confirmed, that the Mimics originally came from a secondary sphere attached to the Fey Sphere, but not our own. Upon entering the Fey Sphere, they were changed, most likely by some powerful Fey, to become what they are today. Mimics are sedentary ambush predators that blend into their environment by mimicking the objects around them. There are a great many subspecies of Mimic that can be broken down by what they tend to impersonate and what they typically eat. Unlike in fantasy novels, where mimics can change their form at will in an instant, most species have fixed forms that change throughout different stages of their life. There are those few generalist species that can replicate objects they observe, though the transformation takes months to achieve and burns through a great deal of calories. Most follow the metamorphosis pattern, where at different stages of their life cycle they will take fixed forms that they have no control over, just like the subject of today's lecture. We have observed a great deal of these specialist mimics, from those that resemble trees to those that resemble deceased animals. Most will also have an intermediate stage, where they will take a middle form that resembles something entirely different from their adult form. This can be anything from a small stone to a flower. Throughout the stages of their lives after the larval form, mimics will each possess a natural lure. This can be as simple as excreting the scent of rotting flesh, to as complex as creating fully formed fruits. The subject of today's lecture, the false hill, has 5 distinct stages of life that fall into 5 specific forms that they take as they develop. Firstly, the seed form, resembling a dandelion seed, though with the actual seed replaced with a single egg. These float in the millions upon thermal currents as the young beings develop inside their eggs. Once the false hills are ready to hatch, the eggs will begin to take on water from the atmosphere, increasing their weight and causing them to slowly fall down to the earth below. Most of these will perish within large bodies of water or upon unsuitable terrain, but for those that land safely, usually within the hundreds of thousands, they will go on to this second stage. Secondly, the larval form. Resembling a tadpole or mud skipper with too many eyes, at this stage after emerging from their eggs, their life is a race against time. Specifically, in this form they lack anything resembling a mouth and sustain themselves with large amounts of stored body fat. Their goal is to find a location suitable for the rest of their lives. They will search for an area with relatively flat ground and a large amount of life filling the space. This is the only stage of their lives where independent movement is possible, aided by 2 short but powerful, for their size, arms that drag them along the ground. Of the 100,000 that entered the larval form, only around 10,000 will make it to the third form. Thirdly, the juvenile form. It has been argued that the juvenile form could be broken into 4 or even 5 distinct forms of its own. This is due to the false hill mimicking different deceased animals, varying in size as they grow. To begin, they change from their larval form into a replica of a dead and rotting songbird. This is to attract insects to themselves that act as the false hill's first meal. From here they will change form 4 more times, from songbird to rodent, to hedgehog, to cat, and finally to badger. As they gain in size, so too will the prey they intend to attract, allowing them to gain the nutrition they will need to enter the next stage of their lives. Of the tens of thousands that entered the juvenile form, only a few thousand will survive, as most will have either been eaten due to attracting predators too large for them themselves to eat, or because of starving due to lack of prey. Fourthly, the adult form. This is where their name, the false hills, derives. Typically starting at around half a meter tall, more of a mound than a hill, they will possess hundreds of mouths covering their surface. These mouths are hidden beneath a thick layer of grass-like hairs that act as the creature's camouflage. They will open the smallest of holes in these mouths when one is vacant and release the same smell of death they did during their juvenile form. This brings living animals to the mound to investigate, where the mouth will open beneath the animal, dropping it inside the false hill, where the mouth will close and the creature will begin digesting. It will take decades to centuries for the false hills that are left to grow to full size. However, this is more of a survival strategy than a lack of nutrition. The adult form progresses so slowly that people do not notice their growing size, allowing them to reach their full potential, where they will develop a tree-like growth atop themselves. Of the thousands that entered the adult form, only around 10 will make it to full adulthood, as most will be destroyed, usually due to human activity. For those few that do, they are lucky enough to reproduce, releasing their genetic material up into the air, where it will mix with other false hills, beginning the cycle again. If the false hills were only eating the odd animal while remaining hidden from the general public, the Order would adopt a policy of observation rather than destruction. However, in their adult form, not only do they eat humans, they actively lure humans. They achieve this with two strategies. Firstly, aesthetics. The adult form aims to create a picturesque location atop itself that appears very inviting to the human mind. Secondly, they will release subtle scents upon the breeze that specifically targets humans. These can be many different things, from wildflowers to baking bread, all of which act as a lure for people. The false hill, once a human target is over one of its mouths, will open it suddenly, creating a pit trap for the unlucky soul. If the individual manages to catch themselves using their arms on the edge of the mouth, the false hill will begin quickly closing and opening the mouth, repeatedly stabbing the victim with its many teeth. These teeth hold two functions. The first is to hook the victim, stopping them from pulling themselves out of the trap, and the second is to create blood loss, weakening the victim so that they stop resisting and eventually fall into the mouth enough so that it can close. Once inside, whether passed out due to blood loss or not, the victim will be within a spherical cavity inside the false hill, with the mouth locked shut, preventing escape. This cavity will slowly fill with digestive fluid that will, over time, melt the victim, allowing the false hill to absorb the nutrients within. Interestingly, false hills do not breathe through their mouths, and instead, much like insects, use sphericals that cover their bodies and are hidden beneath the grass-like hairs. Each of these sphericals is attached to a lung-like organ that draws oxygen into the larger body. Their breathing is remarkably faint, however, due to their non-existent levels of physical activity. Along with this, they possess a rib-like structure that holds their form so that they do not bend or shift while breathing or when walked upon. Their entire form is dedicated to this deception to an unsettling degree, lending credence to the idea that they were changed by a fae specifically to harm human beings. Destroying a false hill is an exercise in caution, requiring both great patience and quick reflexes. The main aim is to locate the mouths of the being, as these are the only unprotected parts of their bodies. You'll want to be equipped with either a collection of long and sturdy pikes, or a weapon such as the spear launcher made by Davis & Sons. Once you know you are dealing with a false hill, you'll need to bait the entity into opening its mouth, typically with yourself, then jumping back as to not be eaten. Once you've found a mouth, attempt to coax it into opening again, this time either stabbing or shooting into it. This process will need to be repeated many times depending on the size of the false hill, until enough damage is done so that the creature expires. This is obviously a highly dangerous task that can go wrong in many different ways. Too many hunters, having found a mouth, have jumped back only to fall into another. The Order has been researching ways to possibly poison these entities, however, so far they have proven remarkably resistant to our efforts. Even cold iron does not have any more effect on them than any other metal, as stated, they are not native to the Fae sphere, they are only changed by it. Even with all of this, however, detection is still the most difficult aspect of dealing with the false hills, requiring exhaustive research through old topographical maps in order to locate them. The false hills are an interesting case, at least to me. They are not intelligent entities, being comparable in both intellect and some aspects of lifestyle to creatures like barnacles. However, what captivates me is what they were. The Fae sphere runs on a logic all its own that is incredibly difficult for those of our sphere to comprehend. The fact of the matter is that the entire collection of entities that fall under the umbrella of Mimic could have once been intelligent, free-thinking beings. The Fae are fickle and wrathful, though creating such a detailed life cycle for something on a whim does not fall within their usual activity, as normally they would get bored with the process long before that point. However, if they'd been offended, they would dedicate themselves fully to what they deemed as a fitting punishment. Whatever the Mimics once were is long since lost. However, what they did to draw such ire is still worth thinking about, because what if they found a way to deal with the Fae issue at large, and were punished before they could implement it? But that will be all for today, with Arthur's might and Merlin's wisdom. Thank you.